Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, I want to talk about something I haven't gotten around to in a long time. I've kind of danced on the issue on other subjects on my podcast, and they've kind of come close when I've talked about like operant conditioning. But today, I want to kind of discuss a topic that sparks a lot of curiosity, definitely a lot of discussion within the community. I want to talk about punishments in the BDSM lifestyle and how dominants and submissives navigate these spaces as training utilities, and how they impact us. Even maybe we can get to the point when, if I've got time at the end, I want to go over some examples. But before I kind of dive into this subject, I want to take a moment to discuss that the timing, there's an important perspective on the timing of punishments within the dynamic. All right. So if we look at discipline and training, there are fundamental aspects of BDSM dynamics. Punishments in this realm play a crucial role in enforcing rules and boundaries. They provide structure. They provide guidance by helping individuals internalize desired behaviors. However, it's important to recognize that the first 6 months of a dynamic are a crucial learning curve for both partners. Now, that's what I tend to tell people. For me, that's very subjective. There's no object or, there's nothing objective about our lifestyle. There's no hard and fast rules. There's no governing body. I mean, for the most part, we're down to two things we can agree on in the lifestyle, and that's consent and communication. And even those people take in varying degrees. But what I tend to tell people is in the first 6 months of entering a dynamic, you've hammered out your details, you're starting to set up protocols, your rituals, your training tasks, you're discussing, or you may have entered a scene, right? That in the first 6 months, there's a lot of learning to go on. So if the dominant, and we're talking in a real DS dynamic where the dominant's teaching, they might be providing literature or places for the submissive to go and learn. The dominant's learning new tricks because the sub's now more into edge play, for example. So he has to become, or they have to become, more familiarized with the topic, right? If now punishments come in, and I often hear about this, and I heard about this recently, which is really what sparked me wanting to do this, was that somebody was in a dynamic for a couple of weeks, and first thing they were being told was kind of, I'm choosing how you wear your hair, what clothes you're wearing to work, and the good morning and good night texts. And this was just a dynamic that was just for brand new person just entered the lifestyle. Now for me, it's completely wrong. When I asked this person what was the goals of them doing this, they kind of looked at me like a deer in the headlights and really had no basic understanding of why these enforcements or tasks were being done. There was no explanation. So number one, right off the bat, there's a failure of the dominant. And if you know me, I don't like to pick on doms, but today it's really more about starting to understand why we're doing things. And as dominants, how much responsibility of the dynamic really does fall on our shoulders. So understanding how much that primary responsibility is upon us, we have to learn to nurture and mentor our submissives without the use of formal punishments, right? Because if they get something wrong, my first question to a dominant, and I'm not talking about some people I associate with privately who've been in dynamics for, a decade or longer, perhaps. I'm talking about, new people, and what's going on is the submissives aren't learning anything. They're not understanding why they're learning positions. They may not understand why they're journaling or reading and having to talk about what they've learned back to their dominant. And the dominant's not checking in. So it's kind of a two-way street. However, they're given a task in this example, and the submissive doesn't complete the task. The submissive may not necessarily understand why the task was given in the first place. So that's failure one. Failure two is along the way, maybe throughout the week, the dominant should be checking in. In the beginning of my dynamic, I did daily check-ins. And I'm not one, for those who know me, I hate texting. So it's either going to be face-to-face or it was going to be at least over the phone. How are you doing? Do you understand the material? How's the reading coming along? How's the position training? How are all these things going? And allows a crucial time in the beginning for the D and the S to start establishing boundaries of what the learning curves are for people and how much oversight the dominant has to give to the submissive to make sure they're staying on task. Now, in one talk that I tend to give a lot at dungeons or in some virtual conferences or when I speak sometimes at other locations, one thing I tell people all the time is, and I don't want to stray too far away from my point on punishments today, but there's three things that I tend to hammer out in the very beginning, and it's the precursor to the contract I have. That is the non-negotiables, the negotiables, and the X factor. And I have mentioned these before. I've talked about them in writings. A non-negotiable right off the bat is someone's health, someone's work, their family, if they're in school. These things for me are a non-negotiable. I don't think in most dynamics, and I think a lot of people, even some traditional people out there that I've seen, I don't necessarily agree where the dominance needs will trump all of those things. You can't, because people have to work unless you've somehow now, you're 5 years down the line perhaps, and you've entered a MS dynamic. Submissive is living with you. You're providing all of the needs. You're providing housing and clothing and food and all these things and financial support. But if you're not, you can't interfere in some of these things. The second part, and that's a quick snapshot. Now, after that stuff are the needs of the dominant. And that's when that comes in. And there's always room to add things as well. These aren't hard and fast. I then go into negotiables. How often we'll play, whether sex is involved, how often we want to go to, training events. Can they go to training events? Do they want to be in public? Things that they would like to learn over the first 6 months. And a lot of the times when I'm discussing these things, people talk about, they think they're their limits. And these are not. These are completely different. Finally, I put in the X factor. And the X factor is for things that are outside of all of our control, right? It's everything in our external environment. There's a car accident or something on the road, or there's a storm, the bridge is washed out, and I can't get somewhere. It's out of my control. Dominants tend to end up getting angry or upset, and this becomes an incorrect behavior because they're telling the submissive that they are unhappy or they are disappointed. The biggest, the two worst words for a submissive to hear is, I'm disappointed from your dominant. But if you do these things without properly training someone, and then you start inflicting punishments, so you're going to make them sit in the corner, or you're going to ignore them, so on and so forth, and I'll get into some examples later, in the first 6 months, you're going to create resentment because you're not showing them that you're actually in control. You're showing them that you just want to be an authoritarian. We are in a position to train if that's what you want to do, unless you're looking for someone that's more experienced and you're more experienced, and that's fine. But if you're training from the ground up, you've got to kind of hover and explain. So I tend not to get into any punishments for at least 6 months. For me, it's typically 6 months to a year, because there's a lot of things along the way that somebody's got to learn and absorb, and everybody learns and absorbs differently, and you can't fault them for that. But what I can do is fault for myself for not checking in and seeing how they're doing and seeing if they have questions. So we need to understand that by allowing this grace period, the dominant can focus on teaching and building trust and ensuring a solid foundation for the dynamic as we move forward. Right? So now that we start to understand the significance of this initial phase in the dynamic, let me get to my next point. Behavior modification. Now, punishments can be a valuable tool for shaping and adjusting certain behaviors, ultimately by promoting personal growth, development. We implement thoughtfully and consensually these punishments so we can help then guide individuals in making positive changes that can align with the desired goals set by the two people inside of the dynamic. And that's very important, because we have to have had to agree what we want out of this. It's not just, oh, you're a dom, you're so hot, I want to kneel at your feet, and that does happen. Or the doms that are just coming in. And a lot of the times, I tend to have a couple of questions, and I tell this to people all the time. The first thing I ask anybody in the lifestyle, I don't care if they're a dom or a submissive or whatever, wherever they're identifying, is how long have you been in a lifestyle? I'm not asking you how long you've been kinky. I'm not asking how long you've, been playing around with fetishes. I'm actually asking you if this for you is a lifestyle. For me, it is. I come from a law enforcement and military background, so high protocol for me, it's formulaic, it's systemic, and it's easy for me. I can follow it. It's rigid, and that aligns with my personal beliefs. So if people give me like, oh well, I've been in BDSM for, I don't know, about 6 months. Well, I realize that this person has a lot that's in front of them that they're going to be learning and absorbing, hopefully. But if they start spouting off about all of these different things and they're throwing the lexicon of words of BDSM at me, I know that they have no idea. And it's the same with dominance. And the next thing I tend to ask people is, have you ever gone to a dungeon? Have you ever gone to a DomCon or a convention? Have you ever gone to a training event? Anything. Any of these things. Now, none of these questions by themselves are necessarily red flags. But then I get to kind of my third one. My third one is, have you ever had or are you seeking a mentor in the lifestyle? Now, me personally, my first mentor I had for about 17 years. Absolutely wonderful sadist. Absolutely brutal, and I learned a lot. As time and space, and we move around and things, eventually I met some other people that strengthened my new training adaptations of things I want to do and learn, and I've gone under their mentorship. Me as well, I have mentored others. Now, when I place these three questions together, I get a very good idea of what people are ideas or views or thoughts are about BDSM or the lifestyle itself, right? Now, I know I've kind of strayed away a little bit here from the punishments aspect, so I want to kind of start circling back to that and, bring this back in when we're looking at behavior modification and how this kind of plays within a psychological aspect. Now, behavior modification through punishments is a powerful mechanism for personal growth. By associating negative consequences with undesired actions, individuals can actively work towards improving themselves, right? So if they're being punished, years in because the submissive is acting out, or I don't enjoy brats. So if mine speaks back or talks back in an undesirable behavior, there's going to be consequences for those actions. And that way she works on knowing what I like. In 9 years, people are fascinated to find out she's only ever been punished once. One time. And that was it. Never done it again. Now, I have friends that will reach out to me, and because of my proclivities and my thought range and how my mind works, and they'll ask me for help with punishments. But that's a different story. Now, it's crucial to approach behavior modification with respect, empathy, and open communication. We also need to understand that behavior modification has to be done on a light approach, and everybody must consent. Because if you are modifying someone's behavior, if your dynamic ends, you have to decondition yourself from that modification, because that's now associated with the person that was in charge or the person you were in charge of. The process needs to be collaborative. It has to ensure that both partners actively participate in setting goals and establishing boundaries for the behavior modification. So, looking at that, I want to look at another aspect of punishments in the lifestyle. And this becomes the release of the psychological and emotional tensions. And punishments can offer a safe and consensual outlet for processing guilt, shame, and other complex emotions, ultimately facilitating the emotional catharsis and personal growth. And this is something that I work on in therapy with my clients. Now, one thing I'm going to say, because I've written a paper about this before, there is people who on social media have taken my work. One person in Georgia did, literally word for word. BDSM is not therapy at all. Can it be a therapeutic coping mechanism? 100% it can be. But it is not a substitution for you to get into to think that this is going to be the way you're going to get over traumas or anything else. I see a lot of people lately, again, talking about how BDSM can be used for therapy. They're going into realms and giving people really bad advice. There was a group I was a part of telling people that you should stop taking medications. I never give direct advice online that goes against my licensure. I can't. But I saw these people telling others, don't take your medicine, or this is what you should be doing, or this is how you reduce your doses. If you're not their GP, don't give people medical advice, and honestly, don't give people psychological advice. If you're not someone in the mental health capacity, whether you're a psychiatrist, a clinician, a counselor, a therapist, whatever, if you're not in it, stop giving advice. And don't do it in this realm when we're talking about the emotional release and act as someone's therapist. Because I gave a talk not long ago on my podcast where I said, your dominant is not your therapist either. And that goes both ways. Your submissive isn't either. So getting back to this, in the realm of BDSM, punishments can serve as a pathway for emotional release and catharsis. Through consensual exploration of punishments, right? The key word is consensual. Individuals can safely navigate and process various psychological and emotional tensions. Now, it's important to create this environment where both partners feel comfortable expressing their vulnerabilities and emotions, thus ensuring that punishments are approached with care, aftercare, if you've agreed to it, and open lines of communication and effort. Nothing that we do inside of this lifestyle can be done without effort. And the amount of people that I see that are in this lifestyle that don't put in effort get very little in return. I've called it the baby bird syndrome. I've talked about it before. I can't spoon feed somebody. If you are new and you are coming in and you are hungry and you're like, can you show me where to go? Can you point me in some direction so I can start reading? Absolutely. Because I'm just giving you the path. You have to follow up. But if I end up checking in with you and you tell me, oh, well, yeah, I looked at the reading, or I read that book, but I stopped after a page, the effort's not there, right? Effort is paramount to everything we do. And if we can't agree with anything besides what the acronym of BDSM stands for, if we can't agree with what safety is, because I've talked about that, consensual or sane, we should all be able to agree that effort is one of the key aspects in the lifestyle. It's the key aspect in everything we do. It takes effort for us to breathe, and that's an involuntary response, right? All of these things, we've got to eat, to go to work, all these things take effort. So let's continue by kind of exploring more of these power dynamics and this aspect of punishments within the lifestyle. Now, punishments can be instrumental in reinforcing the power exchange dynamics between the D and the S, solidifying their roles and their responsibilities. In power exchange, there lies at the core of BDSM relationships, right? Punishments here can play a pivotal role in emphasizing and reinforcing these dynamics and their hierarchies. By incorporating punishments, the power imbalance between the partners is further accentuated, creating a heightened sense of power exchange. Because that's literally what we're here in the lifestyle for. Especially if you're into BDSM, especially if you're part of the lifestyle, especially if you're getting into the DS lifestyle. Pardon me. The DS lifestyle, this is about a consensual power exchange, or a consensual erotic power exchange. It's essential to navigate these dynamics with the utmost respect, consent, communication, clearly defined negotiation parameters, and ensure that both people feel safe and fulfilled within their respective roles. And this is where, you know, dominance, this nurturing aspect, it doesn't mean you're a daddy dom. It just means you are taking charge of someone. Um, there should be no reason that this is problematic. There shouldn't be any reason that you're becoming angry or frustrated because somebody's not picking something up just because you may have 2, 3, or 5 years of experience under your belt and they're not catching up as fast as you. Everybody learns at a different pace, right? So if we don't understand that, we're going to end up taking more people out of the lifestyle than bringing them into it. And that's the whole reason people are coming to it. Now, I mentioned erotic aspects of the lifestyle. So I want to talk about the erotic aspects of punishments within the lifestyle. And for some people, punishments can be inherently arousing. It becomes almost fetishized, right? Adding an extra layer of intensity and excitement to their play and to their scenes. Now, punishments, when integrated into BDSM scenes, have the potential to ignite eroticism and arousal, and at some points can even ignite orgasm or the denial thereof, depending on where you are. The consensual and controlled nature of the punishments can heighten the anticipation, they intensify the scenes, and they create a unique blend of pleasure and pain. And it's vital to establish clear boundaries, negotiate these limits, and prioritize aftercare if, again, you've negotiated this, to ensure that both parties fully enjoy the erotic stimulation derived from the punishments themselves, right? So I have a little time left here. I want to kind of go over some common type punishments that we hear inside of the lifestyle. So one of the few that I often hear about is a timeout. The submissive partner may be required to take a break. They'll sit in a designated spot, put them in a room, and they can reflect on their behavior. Now, if you're with a masochist, that's nothing. They're going to do that on their head. So there's variations. I have heard that somebody will make somebody kneel on rice, but to then raise the level of that, they might soak the rice in like rubbing alcohol, and then make them kneel on it. Something else is a modification punishment is writing, right? The submissive partner is told to write lines related to their particular behavior when they've broken a certain rule, and this reinforces discipline and promotes reflection. And I'm going to go through this very small list I have, and then I want to talk to dominance here. The loss of privileges. Now, this is a big one. The dominant can, maybe remove TV time, or if they love music, to restrict music. Taking away privileges or these activities that the S-type enjoys, right? And this, again, helps reshape behavior. Now, if you are more into the physical side of discipline, this can include things like light spankings. If they're not a masochist, this is going to work, right? Floggings, impact play as a form of punishment. And it's crucial to establish clear boundaries and use the appropriate implements when you're based on the comfort levels and the agreed upon intensity, right? Because you don't want to use something that someone can't handle. Another one is you can assign chores or tasks for somebody to do that are outside of the purview of what your submissive is already doing during the week, right? They may have to do household chores or take on extra responsibilities. And they're doing these, again, as a point of reflection. There's also verbal correction, right? I might reprimand and to address the behavior once it's happening, and this reinforces the rules and protocols that we've set in place. Now, the next one's more, a lot of people use it in play. It can be used as a form of punishment. Denial of orgasm, right? Or we're bringing someone to the height or their pinnacle of orgasm and then we stop. This reinforces the control aspect and the discipline aspect of the hierarchy of the two in the power exchange itself. And finally, there's always, a public display of correction. And this can tend to be a little bit more embarrassing, but in certain cases, the dominant may choose to administer a public punishment or even a semi-public punishment, such as a spanking or verbal degradation, because this way the submissive is learning, they maybe brought shame or disrespectfulness to their dominant. Now, these are just some examples of them, but I wanted to remind you, this isn't an exhaustive list. I mean, whatever your mind can come up with as form as a punishment, but the punishment needs to fit the level of the rule that's broken. If you don't do that, you're over punishing somebody, or conversely, you can under punish them and the behavior might continue. Now, for some of you I know that have written in, they might be saying, I'm going to write some of these down. These are good ideas. That's great. But also you need to be very well aware, if you're training someone in the beginning, what is the point as a dominant to punish? And we need to understand that, why we are punishing. We also we have to remember, as dominants and submissives alike, we are not infallible. We all make mistakes. But that first 6 months, that first year is highly crucial. It's very, very crucial that we are kind of hovering over them to make sure that they're being trained in the fashion we want to train them, that they're doing as they're told, that they're following through, that they're gaining knowledge, that we're providing and answering their questions or getting them the answers they're asking. This is what sets a solid foundation of trust, care, communication, and effort for a dynamic that then can go the distance. But if you're just involved in something in a couple of weeks and somebody starts lashing out punishments at you, you may want to rethink the type of dynamic that you are in. Now, I'd love to hear some feedback about this, the types of punishments maybe people have ever experienced in their time, if they felt that punishments were out of line. I'll post a question here on Spotify, please, or in my other platforms. Please, let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on punishment? Do you use it? Do you not use it? Is it something that you regularly use? Why? By the way, if you are listening to me on Spotify, thank you. As some of my more and more listeners from parts of Europe, even Africa now, welcome. Following my show on Spotify, especially on the app, please ask you to rate it 5 stars so other people can find it. I do have a book out called Tangled Desires, the intersection of BDSM and psychology. It's actually going through its 2nd revision right now. That'll be available. I'm also going to do a price reduction and go from there. I've kind of listened to the audience a little bit. Sometimes you write things and they're not as awesome as you think they are, or people don't want to pay for that awesomeness. That's okay. Anyway, but yeah, so let me know your thoughts on punishments as we go from there. Love to listen and read the comments. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay king.